Hey folks, Attorney Andrew Branca here from Law of Self-Defense, and you may have seen a video going around the internet of President-elect Trump saying that he would sign national concealed carry reciprocity if he were reelected. And of course, he has been reelected. So are we looking forward to national concealed carry reciprocity? You may be surprised to hear that this Second Amendment absolutist believes that national concealed carry reciprocity is a bad idea. Let's talk about it. And if you stay to the end, I'll share with you all how you can join us for our upcoming Law of Self-Defense Hard to Convict class. The class is 100% free. It teaches you how to be hard to convict if you're ever compelled to use force in defense of yourself, your family, your property. I'll share more details in just a moment. So let's start off right with the clip here of President-elect Trump talking about his plans for national concealed carry reciprocity.
Seventh, I will protect the right of self-defense everywhere it is under siege, and I will sign concealed carry reciprocity. Your Second Amendment does not end at the state line.
Well, I certainly agree with that. Your Second Amendment does not end at the state line. And of course, my first reaction to this is amazing. This is fantastic. As a Second Amendment advocate, this is exactly what we need our president to be saying. Imagine how different a message we'd be hearing if Kamala Harris had been elected. And we do need to grab every win that's on the table. Certainly the gun controllers grab every anti-Second Amendment win that's on the table, always fighting for that ratchet effect, a little more control, a little more control, a little more control. Well, we need to grab every win. A little more freedom, a little more freedom, a little more freedom. And that certainly includes this. But my lawyer side of my brain, the one that's compelled to engage in critical thinking and look at things from all sides, tells me that this really is a bad idea, or at least it's not the best idea. It's not the right idea. And I see a lot of people analogizing this notion of national concealed carry reciprocity to driver's licenses, for example. You travel from Texas, where you live, to Connecticut, and Connecticut recognizes your Texas driver's license. Why not have that with concealed carry permits? Sounds like a good idea. But I think that's rather naive thinking, because other states recognize driver's licenses from outside their jurisdiction because they want to. They've explicitly agreed to. They volunteered to recognize out-of-state licenses. That's not their attitude when it comes to concealed carry. Not the gun control states, not the ones that don't want concealed carry even for their residents. They're not simply going to accept out-of-state concealed carry permits, or at least they're not going to make it easy. And making it a federal law doesn't really get us to a complete solution. And I think a good analogy here can be made with FOPA, F-O-P-A. So FOPA is the Firearms Owners Protection Act. It's a federal law. It effectively says that if you're in lawful possession of a gun in state A and would like to transport that gun to another state where you'd be in lawful possession, state C, but to do that, you'd have to cross a gun control state in which possession would be unlawful, state B. FOPA says you're still allowed to transport that gun across that gun control state and not be committing a crime. Now, there are conditions to FOPA. The gun has to be legal where it is and legal where it's ultimately going. It has to be unloaded while it's being transported through the gun control state. It has to be inaccessible to people inside the vehicle, so in the trunk, for example. And it needs to be locked in a hard case. But FOPA says if you're doing all that, it's lawful for you to transport that weapon even through a state where possession of that weapon would otherwise be unlawful, either because the gun's unlawful or you don't have the right permission slips from the gun control state, whatever the case may be. So that's a good thing, right? But how does FOPA work in reality? Take a state like New Jersey, a real hard, fascist, anti-Second Amendment gun control state. You're transporting a firearm from where it's legal to where it's legal, but through the state of New Jersey. And for whatever reason, somehow, law enforcement becomes aware that you have a rifle case in the trunk of your car. They stop you. They spot the case. Do they say, oh, under FOPA, this is fine for you to do this. Be on your way, citizen. Or do they arrest you for being in unlawful possession of a firearm under the laws of New Jersey? And if you bring up FOPA, they say, hey, that sounds awesome. You should raise that as a legal defense at your criminal trial on the felony charge of being in unlawful possession of a gun. They do the latter, folks. They don't want you to have the gun in their state. They're not happy about FOPA, and they're going to make it as hard work for you as possible. They're not going to wave you along. It's common in New Jersey for people in this circumstance to find themselves arrested, criminally charged, prosecuted, and put in front of a jury in a criminal trial. And there they can tell their FOPA story. Maybe it works. Although there's always at least a 10% chance of getting convicted, no matter how innocent you actually are. Or maybe it doesn't work. Maybe the prosecutor can successfully argue that you didn't meet one of the conditions of FOPA, that it wasn't a hard case, that it wasn't locked, that it wasn't separate from ammo, that it wasn't inaccessible. The rear seats fold down. Maybe you could have just reached in that trunk. It was accessible, so you don't qualify for the FOPA safe harbor. And then you end up getting convicted. The point is, if a state like New Jersey and states like the other gun control states, California, New York, Maryland, they're all the same. If that's how they treat FOPA, how do you expect they're going to treat your out-of-state concealed carry permit? You think they're going to discover you are carrying a gun concealed in their jurisdiction and they're going to say, oh, citizen, that's fine. President Trump signed national concealed carry reciprocity, so we fully acknowledge and respect your out-of-state concealed carry permit. Or do you think they're going to arrest you and charge you and prosecute you and say, you know what, you can waive that Texas concealed carry permit in front of the jury. See how they feel about it. Maybe you don't even get convicted. But even if you don't get convicted, you're going to trial. It's easily tens of thousands of dollars, maybe six figures in legal fees. You don't get that money back just because it turned out you were right. And of course, the chance of getting convicted is never actually zero. So I think we should grab national concealed carry reciprocity with both hands. It's an incremental win. But I don't think it's the ultimate solution. So then you're probably thinking, well, Andrew, what is the ultimate solution? Well, the ultimate solution looks like something more like this, that the Supreme Court becomes unambiguous about the Second Amendment, stops leaving loopholes for these lower federal courts and states that are in open rebellion against SCOTUS Second Amendment jurisprudence, becomes hyper-aggressive about squashing these rebellious lower courts, reviewing their unconstitutional rulings immediately within the week rather than years down the road. And we also, I think, need Congress to pass a Second Amendment version of 18 U.S.C. 1983. So Section 1983 is part of the federal code. It's typically applied in police use of force scenarios, but essentially what it does is it creates a private cause of action, a private right to go to federal civil court and bring a lawsuit. So you're not dependent upon a prosecutor agreeing with you. It's your right to bring a civil lawsuit against a police officer and his department if they use excessive force against you. Essentially, it says that they can be held liable for violating the constitutional rights of an American citizen. Now, in theory, that should apply to violating any constitutional rights, but in practice, it's typically applied only to police use of force cases. Now, I think we need a form of 1983, can we call it Section 1984, that's specific to the Second Amendment. So there is no ambiguity about whether or not this is law with regards to the Second Amendment. It should say that if anybody under color of law, meaning as an agent of the government, a police officer, any official of the government, infringes an American citizen's Second Amendment right, that citizen whose rights have been infringed has a right to a civil cause of action against that individual personally and against their department. Now, when we look at Section 1983 cases, excessive force cases, those people are entitled to monetary damages, often to the tune of millions of dollars, and attorney's fees. And that attorney's fees clause is really important because it means even poor people whose rights are infringed by the government can get representation because the lawyers don't have to worry whether their client can pay their legal bills. The loser, the government, will pay the legal bills. So we need that provision in our Second Amendment version of Section 1983 as well. Let's see how aggressive police officers and agents of the government are about infringing our Second Amendment rights when they know that if they do that, there will be thousands of lawyers waiting to get rich, bringing these cases. They're civil cases, so the lawyer can argue these on a contingency basis and walk away with 30% of the monetary damages plus their legal fees covered. There'll be thousands of lawyers willing to represent those of us whose Second Amendment rights have been infringed. And the people doing the infringement suddenly know, hey, if I do this, I can get sued. I can lose my house. I can lose my kid's college fund. I could lose my pension. And their departments know, hey, if our officers do this, if they go out and infringe American citizens' Second Amendment rights, it's going to cost us millions and millions of dollars in civil damages. You think the training in the academy might change to reflect the concerns of the department paying for the training at the academy? You think police might be taught different things about how important Second Amendment rights are, just as they're taught today about excessive force liability for their department? I think so. So, for sure, we should grab national concealed carry reciprocity with both hands. It's a win. Take the win. But it's the win in a battle. It's not the victory in the war. The victory in the war is what I've just described. SCOTUS going super aggressive on these lower federal courts and jurisdictions in open defiance and rebellion against their Second Amendment jurisprudence, and the creation of a civil cause of action, a private cause of action that any American citizen can bring an agent of the government to federal court for monetary damages and legal fees for violating their constitutional rights. All right, folks, I promised to tell you how to join us for our upcoming Law of Self-Defense Hard to Convict class. It's coming up in just days now. At this Hard to Convict class, which is 100% free, we teach you how to be hard to convict if you're ever compelled to use force in defense of yourself, your family, or your property. Doesn't cost a penny, but there are limited seats because it is live streamed, so we have live Q&A. And I need to make sure that I have sufficient bandwidth to address everybody's questions. So I would encourage you to grab a seat before they're all gone. Doesn't cost anything, but you need to reserve a seat. You can do that at lawofselfdefense.com/hard-to-convict. Do it now. lawofselfdefense.com/hard-to-convict. All right, folks, until next time, I'll just remind all of you that if you carry a gun so you're hard to kill, that's why I carry a gun, so I'm hard to kill, so my family is hard to kill, then you also owe it to yourself and your family to make sure you know the law so you're hard to convict as well. Until next time, I remain Attorney Andrew Branca for the lawofselfdefense.com. Stay safe.